Live from Pacific Junction Hotel.
It's funny, I never thought about Jordan Peterson and Justin Bieber in the same category before. What happened to Canadians being nice? I'm not sure. Maybe it got too boring and people were looking at U.S. politics and how polarizing and sensational and entertaining it was. And that's carried over here.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You look at the American landscape. They've got like things from like John Oliver to The Daily Show with Trevor Noah to like all those late night shows, whatever. And we basically have this hour has 22 minutes. The amount of volume and jokes and sarcasm and satire they have compared to ours. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So the documentary, as I said, is Shut 'Em Down, The Rise of Jordan Peterson. And I saw like... Even as you were posting stuff on Twitter, I went on Twitter and YouTube. I read some of the comments, which I know you're not supposed to do. But what's interesting is like there was like two groups of fears, right? There was like one group of people were scared that this was going to be like a character assassination, and then another group were like scared that like you would praise them or like kind of give them a bigger platform and these kind of things. But the problem is though is that a filmmaker is kind of driven by curiosity. Mm-hmm. Right? You're not driven by fear. You're driven by curiosity. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's what makes a successful filmmaker, especially for a documentary filmmaker. So how do you balance curiosity with fear?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very interesting in the context of this film. I mean, certainly curiosity was leading me through this, but there was a lot of fear and anxiety, I guess, in knowing that there was going to be these two very polarized reactions. And that was constantly in my mind when thinking about, well, how do we frame this in a way that doesn't disillusion one side of that audience automatically just by things like the title or, the framing of the film and, just using certain terminology. I mean, if you say this film was about political correctness, well, it's like, okay, you picked a side. I know what you're about, and and then people decide automatically, like, okay, I will like this film or I won't like this film.
Even his name too is like another grenade. Because I was like saying to somebody recently, I'm like, I have this documentary filmmaker. She's coming in. She did the Jordan Peterson documentary. And my friend was like, whoa, you're allowed to like bring that up and talk about that or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm not picking a side. She's the one who made it. I'm just like, we're just going to talk about the issues, right? So it's like, even just throwing that out, I'm like, I didn't even say anything positive or negative. I just said I have a filmmaker coming in, right?
Well, the interesting thing is that it's no longer seen as ethical to not pick a side. Like, it's been interesting seeing how, as you mentioned, the social media and how all the comments have been playing out online as people are trying to figure out, well, what should we expect with this film? There does seem to be a common fear among people from, I guess, both sides of this, let's say politically left or right wing leaning. There's a common fear of, what will the bias be? Will this be balanced or not? Yet at the same time, especially coming from the political left, the idea of balance isn't really seen as ethical with regards to journalism anymore. There's this meme going around online, I don't know if you've seen it, that says, if someone says it's raining outside and someone else says it's not raining outside, a journalist's job is to look outside and say, is it raining or not? So that seems to be commonly used. That way of thinking is commonly being described more and more as, what the role is in being ethical. It's like things are either moral or immoral. And so for you to not pick a side or to be balanced, it's unethical because you're making a false balance, let's say. So I was very well aware of that and thinking about that a lot throughout the making of this film. And what I found was the most appropriate way to approach this was to dig into the differing worlds of where people were coming from on opposing vantage points and to really deeply try to understand what's at stake for them. And, what are the points that they're making that make sense to me, once I really scrutinize and go through them and, why does this matter to them? So, I guess on a superficial level, it's about being balanced, but really I did try to treat it as something deeper than that.
Well, and the other problem with what you're saying is that in terms of everything being classified is that you lose nuance too, though.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's like, because Jordan Peterson will say things like, clean your room. I'm like, that's not revolutionary or offensive, right? And so it's like, all right, I can agree with that. But then maybe he'll say some things about trans people or something. I'm like, okay, I don't agree with that. So I don't know then, like, follow up on what you're saying about balance and moral and immoral. Then how come it just can't be a thing where, like, you listen to everybody what they have to say? And it's like, if they say 10 things, I'm like, well, 5 of those I agreed with and 5 of those things offended me. Why does it have to be like almost all or nothing? Because the documentary is called Shut 'Em Down.
That's a very good question.
Do you have an answer, a solution? Can you fix all our problems? We have a lot of problems.
Yeah, I made this film because I have all the answers and it's super easy.
Yeah.
No. The part of the film, I guess, the undercurrent of the film is exploring that question. You know, this ethic of deplatforming someone whose speech you see as unethical. And to a degree, of course, I understand that. But I mean, I think what has been shown is that it's not really effective. It kind of has the opposite result. So,
but we know that from history. Like anytime we've tried to ban books or rap music or any sort of something, we tried to push it down, it ends up either flourishing in the underground and then it sneaks up on us later on because nobody was paying attention properly, or it flourishes. I mean, you know this from like, I thought everybody who's a teenager experienced this, where like your parents tell you, no, you can't go out, right? Or you can't date this person, or you can't have the car. And of course, teenagers are like, what? You can't tell me what to do, right? That's a common refrain. So I don't know why this would be an effective method or worth adopting when the results are not always going to be the desired results.
I think people are so upset and hurt and tired. And, you know, I think for many people, they have a positive outcome in mind. And I guess, you know, some of that history is lost.
So I want to start at the beginning. You were following Jordan before the Professor Against Political Correctness YouTube videos, before Bill C-16. As you were shooting some of this footage, was there any inklings or did your spider sense tingle that something was shifting or that he was kind of onto something, or was there a change of thinking or any sort of something, like any sort of tea leaves?
Before the videos
before all that stuff. You're one of the few people who got to see before, middle, and a little bit after, right? So what was it like before?
So I was making a completely different film before this started. I was following Jordan's friendship with First Nations carver Charles Joseph, who lives on the West Coast, and he's part of the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation. I had been working on that film for 1.5 years before the videos were posted. I didn't see the videos coming, but I will say that there was something about my other film that I felt like wasn't quite lining up yet, but it wasn't something I could articulate as to why. It was just a sort of intuitive sense. I do think in retrospect it was somehow related to this suddenly emerging. But yeah, I didn't see these videos coming. In that summer, before the videos were posted, I also had been focusing a bit more on just commercial video work because the documentary I was working on was completely self-funded. So as I think many documentary filmmakers starting out will do, you know, you'll balance that out with shooting wedding videos and whatever it is. So I was kind of in that space, and then the videos came out and then everything changed.
Why do you think he agreed to do the documentary? I guess the first one that you're talking about with the artist, and then now this one, like knowing that he was like getting bombarded from all sides, right? Like, why would he continue with the documentary?
So the first film, it's funny, when I first approached him, it was with an interest in his ideas. I had been following his work for a very long time, I guess over 10 years now. So I first approached him with that in mind, and then I spoke with him about what else was happening in his life. And then I learned about what was happening with Charles Joseph. And so then I decided to focus the film on that. So why did he agree to it at that point? I mean, probably initially it was because, you know, he's a pretty open person, and, you know, he's interested in projects and seeing where, you know, they'll go. And I think others had approached him about documentaries before, but they hadn't panned out. So I think that was it initially. Then when this controversy broke out, I mean, he was getting so many media requests and even requests from other filmmakers wanting to make a film about this in some way. I think I had already earned his trust because I had been filming with him and his family for a year and a half before that. And I mean, I felt like I couldn't really continue moving in the direction that I was before because this had taken over his life. I didn't see any other path forward.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly
the audience would be angry with you too if you just presented
right.
this documentary with this artist and we're like, what about all the other stuff?
What other stuff? Exactly. I mean, I had to follow it to make sense of it, and because that's what everyone was seeing. So but why did he continue to agree? I think because that trust was there. And, it's not like there weren't other media requests happening anyway. So I guess it was just about continuing to maintain that relationship. But, as he got busier, it was certainly harder. I remember a period I think it was in December probably, where, there was this one shoot that I had planned. And we basically had to sort of cut it short because his family especially was trying to really set better boundaries because he was kind of saying yes to everything. He was doing so many interviews that fall. But his family, especially his daughter and his wife, were like, okay, well, we have to set some boundaries now. And, we barely have any time with Jordan now. So yeah, it did start to get harder. So I had to just try to make it as easy as possible for him and for them, and just insert myself into their schedule and be a fly on the wall wherever possible, and to, step back wherever necessary and then lean in whenever I could.
Before all this happened, you actually took some of his classes at U of T, right? Or you attended some of them with a friend, or your friend took?
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine was studying political science and took a couple of his classes. And I sort of unofficially audited one of them. I didn't do any of the assignments, and I'm not even sure if I attended every single class in the course. But yeah, I did attend some of the classes.
So you feel, because this was one of the themes towards the end of the documentary where people are like, can you believe he's teaching all these students? And this idea that it's like he's corrupted these students, or coming out of that class, do you and your friend, and I know you may not be able to speak for your friend necessarily, but do you guys feel betrayed or misled, or do you, with what he said in the class, do you feel that's what you would expect normally from a U of T professor, or do you feel that there was something a little bit more risky or maybe even corruptive, like this kind of what was implied in the documentary?
So do I feel betrayed by him because of the direction he's gone in now? No,
or even what he was teaching in the class itself too, with the education that you got from him, or from being in the lectures. Do you know what I mean? Do you feel like that it corrupted your thinking, or that it...
No, not at all. To be honest, person that says that, that's someone who said to me that they didn't want to watch any of his YouTube videos because it would give him hits, yet at the same time was keen on organizing protests, which would obviously draw attention to him. So it doesn't really make sense. So I don't know how well that person understands his ideas.
Mm-hmm. And that brings up a valid point, because watching the documentary, I was trying to better understand just what exactly is the threat that Jordan Peterson poses, or how he is dangerous to the trans community. I understand people say somebody like Steve Bannon, who has access to the White House and power and those kind of things, and he can pass laws and have people removed and things like that. I get that part of this. That's a real threat. But how is somebody like Jordan Peterson a threat? Because it was still a little unclear. I'm not trying to be obtuse. I'm just trying to understand the actual issue and what's at stake.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think especially now he's someone that has a huge cultural influence in people's thinking. So I think just even the fact that he was criticizing a human rights law that's for trans people, and talking about pronouns in this context of it being something that people might be insisting upon. It's just, for a lot of people, they didn't even know what a non-binary person was before this. So their first association of a non-binary person is with this, crazy Marxist law, totalitarian law. So from what I found, a lot of the non-binary and trans people that I spoke with weren't even necessarily that concerned with his criticisms about the law, but more so with the negative attention being drawn around pronouns and what that means, and that it's it's going to be this crazy fight, and oh my god, there's 70 pronouns, when in reality the majority of people who identify as non-binary will either use their name or they them pronouns. Some of the other pronouns like ginger, like those are far, far, far less common. So there was more concern about how the public will come to know this issue and them.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned like the trans activists and like the trans community trying to get the public to understand what the situation is and what one of the backlash that Me Too is kind of facing now is like with say somebody like Louis C.K., where people are very frustrated that the media is choosing to focus on Louis C.K. rather than the women that he engaged with, right? And it feels like the women that had the situations with Louis, they don't have a voice or not quite represented in the media. And one of your trans activists, he said that as well. It's really frustrating that Jordan's now getting all this. And you just mentioned like in that fall, like he was doing yes to all these interviews, and he is now obviously a very large, notable public figure. Is that a commentary on media? Is that a commentary on fame? Like, is there something that we're overlooking or our journalists have to adjust? Yeah, what is that commentary on?
And why is it that the attention is focused that way?
Yeah,
that's a good question. Is it what people are interested in generally? Is it that part of human nature is to be interested in the negativity and the person that's bringing in this this criticism that we never would have thought of before?
I find too some journalists are not also equipped. Like some of the Me Too stuff, a lot of journalists haven't really kind of talked or have any sort of sexual abuse background or anything like this. So it's hard to get to talk to the people. It's already hard enough to talk about that experience. But if you're talking to a journalist who doesn't know this stuff, right, then it's like that becomes even harder than to properly translate that experience into the media. Does that make sense?
That's a good point. And I mean, with the case of Louis C.K., he was obviously a hugely popular comedian. So you can't help but also have attention drawn to that side of the story. So it's probably quite a few different factors at play. Yeah.
Is the media understanding enough of the issues of like Jordan Peterson? You mentioned like some of the trans people and they're worried about like non-binary kind of being lost in the mix and stuff like this. Or is it just now just like, are we just at a point where just like, it's just easy clicks? You know what I mean? So you just throw out Jordan Peterson's name and then off you go. And then it's like, you don't really have to even say anything. So that's what I'm saying. So it's like, you feel like the media has gotten, now that Jordan Peterson's been around for a little while, do you feel that the media's got a better handle on Jordan Peterson and the issues? Or is it just kind of now just all a click farm now and just knowing that like you can throw out his name and like protest or something and then that's it? Like it's not like there's no actual issues or nuance again, to go back to that.
Oh gosh, it totally depends. There's both. There's the whole spectrum. There's in the longer form podcasts, like the one we're having right now, you'll be able to have more constructive conversations that get into the nuance. In the shorter media pieces, in some of the news agencies, you don't. I don't know why this just popped in my head, but there was a really weird Mother Jones article that the headline was something about the carnivore diet, the new fad among the alt-right. It was just like, wow, I thought Mother Jones was a legit media source. Like, what is that about? So it's all of the above. I don't know if there's a cohesive answer to that, the media generally.
And as you followed Jordan through this kind of the controversy as you framed it, right? Is he, I don't know how to frame it. Okay, is he in love, I guess, too in love with his own ideas? Or is, because sometimes when you have a friend and they bring around like their new boyfriend and new girlfriend and it's like somebody really crappy and you're like, what? Like, what happened? Like, you're a good person, whatever. Why are you with this crappy? Like, is he in love with his ideas too much and so he can't have any separation? So even when he gets legitimate criticism, he can't separate the criticism from the idea. Like, he'll commit to it no matter what. Or do you find him that kind of he is evolving, kind of thinking through things and kind of working through things?
I think in the right environment, he'll think through it in the way that you're describing. But I think also, because he's felt so cornered and under attack, I think he's been motivated to have to just be really strong in defending his ideas. So in the right space, I think he'll think through it in that open way. But if he's in a conversation where he doesn't feel like the other person is speaking or arguing even in good faith to get to the deeper idea, then I think he won't budge or he won't even engage in it in the way that you're describing.
And I mean, that's very hard because the problem too with somebody like him is that people come with their agendas right away. Right? The mirror and metaphor is like he was working through fame, partly through your documentary, right, towards the end, and he was trying to figure out, and there really is no rules for fame. Right. And a lot of these things too, we're still figuring these things out, these terms, what they mean. And like even something like feminism, which has been around for several decades, it's still a very complex thing. And it means different things to different women and different men. Right. So it's not like we can just boil it all down. So what I'm getting at, I guess, is with Jordan Peterson, is he at the point where like, do you find that his ideas, and as you engage them, do you find that his ideas were getting bigger and bigger, or were they kind of just like getting smaller and smaller and almost more narrow? You know what I mean? And it's kind of like overlooking certain things. Do you get what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. I do. I think so.
Yeah. Sorry, there's a lot there.
Yeah. I don't know if I would characterize it as bigger or smaller, but I would say his thinking is pretty consistent, but he's, honed in on it even more because he's been talking about it so much. I think he's become just, even more direct and precise and specific in what he means about it. But yeah, overall, he's been pretty consistent in what he's saying. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, yeah, because I mean, that's part of that we see that with a lot of the way that the left deals with some of the politicians on the right, for example. They try and do the gotcha stuff, right? It's like, well, you said this in 2016, right? Now you're saying this in 2017 or 2018, like, so... That's the thing. If your thinking is consistent, then it becomes a lot harder to kind of like take you down in a sense, right? Your thinking might be wrong still, but at least if it's consistent, then he's at least committed to it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, definitely. And that's not to say that, there aren't ever these points where it's like, but wait a minute, you said this and isn't that a contradiction? And, it doesn't mean that those things haven't arrived. But overall, the larger messages he's trying to put forward and the ideas he's putting forward, I would say those things have been consistent.
Mm-hmm. And as much as the documentary focuses on Jordan Peterson and issues with the laws and being a social justice warrior and all these kind of things, I mentioned the fact that the documentary does explore fame, right? And that to me is also like an interesting subplot because it is like, this is what we do now. This is how people get famous now, right? It's like, because it's the idea of a professor, like a U of T professor just getting famous. Like we used to just do like basketball or movies or music or something, right? Like the pop culture stuff. Right. But now it's like a U of T professor who's getting famous. And I'm like, that's kind of weird, right? And so was that also something that kind of interested you in terms of your curiosity and like noticing that somebody like unusual is getting famous?
So this is strange. For me, because I knew about his work and reputation at U of T, at least among students, for a long time, in a way, there's something about the fame that didn't surprise me, though, of course, the massive level of it is surprising. But he already was a kind of mini celebrity at the University of Toronto. He was that life-changing professor. After class, students would always line up to ask him questions. And on the last day, they would bring him gifts. And there was a period where the only thing he would drink was Diet Coke. And, he would come into class and there would be a Diet Coke sitting there on the podium that a student left for him. So what I'm seeing happening now in terms of his relationship with young people and how they feel so inspired by his messages, I think that was always there. But it was at a way, 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 way smaller fraction than what it is now.
Do you think or feel like after talking to him and hanging out with him that there is some sort of like end goal or grand vision, or is he just kind of making this up as he goes along? Like, is he trying to start up a think tank or something, or some new university or something, or I don't know what?
I think he is figuring it out as he goes along, but he has talked about this idea of starting an online university, and that is in progress. He does have coders that are working on that and trying to figure out what that could actually look like. So he is moving forward with that.
How do we balance divergent thinkers and mavericks, which, a lot of people in our society revere as well, like Steve Jobs and like the whole Apple thing, think different. Like we like people who think outside the box. But then there's a point where it's like you think too much outside the box, right? And then you get in trouble for that because it's then you borderline or you enter into heresy. And then you end up being shunned and shamed. Because at the same time, like, we don't want to get in a position where, like, if somebody expresses a thought or an idea and it may be counter to what is popular or what is acceptable, we're not going to progress as a society. Have you learned from doing this documentary and hanging out with Jordan Peterson? How do we balance thinking out loud and knowing that we might get into trouble versus like not getting in trouble and not committing heresy.
Well, I think what I've seen is that, when you are going to be thinking out loud and saying something that goes against the grain, it certainly gets a lot of people's attention, both positively and negatively. And it does get a lot of people thinking because it pushes you to, consider things in a way that you haven't before. I certainly saw that with a lot of people around what Jordan Peterson was saying. I don't know if that answers your question in terms of finding the balance. I don't know. Maybe you can't have one without the other in certain cases.
Because it is weird how we do revere certain people who like go outside the box and like,
Right.
You're cool, but then this guy's a jerk face, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, I don't know how it ever like boils down that way.
One of the things that's been so interesting for me in exploring this film is the way I feel like there's this undercurrent of society kind of battling out what it means to be a good person and what our ethics are. And Jordan Peterson has come to represent both the most virtuous hero and this awful bigot. So yeah, it's like in terms of finding that balance, I don't know if there's an answer to that, but this undercurrent of that question, I think, is part of what's playing out right now.
Well, it's interesting because just a slight tangent, but related to what you're saying is that when a lot of actors will play like a quote unquote a bad guy in a Marvel movie or a blockbuster like that, whatever, the actor can't just like write off this character and say he's a bad guy and just kind of like, because oftentimes some of the bad guys, they're actually complex and they actually are trying to do something good. Their just methods are just awful or like, you know what I mean? And the actors have to discover a certain amount of humanity. So that way then like, because you can't just dismiss them like as a blank page or else then they're just like, you know what I mean? They're just like kind of like just a faceless Nazi almost, right? But if you actually can deliver some humanity underneath that. And the other thing, because related to that, is that bad guys also don't always tend to see themselves that way as bad guys, right? And that's the difference. Right. They try to, like I said, they try to see themselves as doing something virtuous or something like this. And then it's just like, Captain America or Daredevil or somebody's in the way. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And I think too, like just listening to what Jordan Peterson was saying in the documentary, he never saw himself the way that other people were viewing him. There was a gap there. So even though he got all these labels, both positive and negative, it didn't reflect his own sense of identity. Does that make sense?
I think, well, as you see in the film and as people will see in the film, if and when they do watch it, part of what is explored in it is, Jordan considering his own identity in this massive transformation.
And what about your own identity? Like you said, you had an emotional journey trying to get all this done, but now you got to get it out into the world. And it seems like I said, like I opened at the top with the YouTube comments and the Twitter comments and stuff like that. So it seems like your emotional journey is still ongoing. And that's the other thing too, I find with Jordan Peterson or people like him. You don't get to arrive at a simple, neat, like, he was a cool guy. You know what I mean? You don't get to arrive at a simple, neat, logical conclusion. Have you found that too? And like you keep shifting and like trying to put it all into some sort of like cohesive emotional package?
In terms of what I think about him?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, one of the questions that I most dread when I'm doing interviews like this is, so what do you think of Jordan Peterson? And I was like, oh, I hope they don't ask me that, but I know everybody wants to know that because yes, I find that it is something so complex and it's hard for me to even begin to know how to answer that.
But it's no different. You're married to somebody, like you love them, but the way you feel about them changes constantly. It's not a static thing, right? And so that's what I find interesting. And you have a longer version of this documentary as well, right?
Yes, it'll be most likely 75 minutes long. It's not completely finished yet, so that's why I'm not 100% sure, but it'll probably be 75 minutes long. Right now, our plans are to release it theatrically in the US and internationally in the spring of 2019, and we'll have more details that we'll be updating on social media as we have it.
And what is the social media so people can follow and see when all that will be happening?
So our website is www.shuthimdownfilm.com. Our Twitter is SHDFilm. And on Instagram, we're Holding Space Films. And our Facebook page is Shut Him Down Film.
Shut 'Em Down on The Rise of Jordan Peterson will air on the CBC on November 2nd at 9 p.m. And I know you can't legislate or anything like this, but are you hoping that people come at this with an open mind and kind of set the agenda aside for like an hour or so and actually kind of like work through some of those issues? Or are you just expecting like an avalanche of just like hate and like things, people gonna make you cry, would be sad?
Quickly before I answer that question, before I forget, just to say that the documentary is broadcasting on CBC Docs POV, and after it broadcasts on TV, it's also going to stream on CBC Docs POV's website. So
Okay.
cbc.ca/watch. But so to answer your question, I certainly hope that people will watch it with an open mind, but it's unrealistic for me to hope that everyone will come at it that way, because I think, especially with this issue, people are coming into it with a very strong opinion. As we've seen in the social media comments, a lot of people think that I'm part of the, evil communist plot to make this hit piece on Jordan Peterson. But yeah, I mean, I think the most that I can hope for is that the film presents to people who have a open enough mind to see that this is at least a bit more nuanced than maybe they thought, and that maybe they'll have a bit more understanding as to where the other side of this is coming from, if they're identifying with one side of this tribe more than the other, and that maybe their strong worldview with regards to this will become slightly more unsure about that, at least to open up some curiosity and some questions.
This is a hard question, so I apologize for it, but I'm curious because as a documentary filmmaker, are documentaries one of the best ways we have to get out of this tribal kind of us and them kind of thing? Because the best documentaries are windows into those worlds, right? This was a window into Jordan Peterson's world, and I wouldn't have had this if you hadn't made this documentary. So are documentaries a way for us to get out of this us and them, when it's like you can kind of see this more humane experience and return back to nuance?
They can be, but it depends on how they're made. They can also be used to make really good propaganda. So I certainly tried to do the former, because I think that, when I looked at all the various different lenses through which I could see this film, it was most important for me to look at it through this lens of political polarization and tribalism, because that's the wave that's running underneath this, and as far as I could see it. So I do think documentaries can be a really important tool for showcasing that complexity and nuance. So yes, but it depends on how they're made.
Okay, that's a positive note. We can end it there. Thank you, Patricia, for coming in. Thank you for making the documentary.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. So I hope people do check it out, and I hope it'll be interesting to see too as it gets out, like you said, out to theatrical release. It'll be interesting to see what the screenings are like and who actually ends up showing, and like, because those are community gatherings, right? And that'll be fascinating to see how that all works out. So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
My name is Sammy Younan. This has been My Summer Lair. Thanks for listening.